Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. It's the week. I can't believe it. I love this time of year. Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. Hope that you will be with your loved ones on this holiday season. And please, even if you have some political disagreements or some kind of disagreement, look, hug it out. Hug it out. There's someone who will be at that table this year who might not be there next year. There's some people who were there last year who are not there this year. Keep that uppermost in your minds. It's a blessing to when one or two of us can gather in his name and rejoice. Be thankful on this day and think of the indigenous people who welcomed all of us here and who were betrayed as we look at Thanksgiving because it means something different to them, and we need to be sensitive to that and really need to talk about that, everybody. I'm sending you so much love today as we are talking about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, the UN's High Court. They have said we are issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu, for Minister Gallant, one of the Hamas leaders. That means in most countries of the world, because most countries are signatories to the ICC, in most countries all over the world, they can arrest him. Now the question is, will the countries do that? Some countries are saying, "Oh yeah, if he comes here, he gets arrested." But what does this mean? What does this mean? Well, he is being treated as a war criminal in many, many places. What does that mean? What does that mean? Hey, Robert, shalom, and MC Vixen V, good morning. Zenobia, hey, sweetie. Sending you all so much love. Everybody, like and share, like and share, like and share. We're on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. Please become my friend there. I can't accept friends anyplace else. Please go to the Santita Jackson and Friends page and the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please go there, like and subscribe, and pass the show along. Pass the show along. One of our shows, one of our most recent shows, had more than 1.5 million views. I'm really thankful to you for that. Because you all continue to pass the show along, and we're grateful for that. But what I need you to do is continue to do that as more and more people are turning to people who really want to have the truth. I am on X at Santita J. Let me just say this at the top. Everybody has their point of view, and I'm going to be honest with you about mine. But what I'm not going to do, or should I say, and what I'm not going to do, is disrespect your point of view, whatever it is. I respect that. What we try to do here is share information with you, give you the facts, and then you make up your own mind. Okay? And so I don't want you to, I want you to just weigh in and just do it in a respectful way. Just do it in a respectful way. That's all that I ask. We have got you, Attorney Mark Fancher. You are just bouncing off the walls. You said this is great news. The ICC, yay, has issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, Philly's own, by the way. Yeah, he was raised in Philly, Philadelphia, in large part. And Dr. David Gibbs, The Revolt of the Rich. I ask you to get that book and put that under someone's Christmas tree. It's going to be a book that will help really to explain why we're here, how we got here. Think about that, everybody. Think about it. But let's talk about the ICC. Some people are saying at long last, Benjamin Netanyahu has gotten an arrest warrant. What does this mean? And the ICC, who are they? Talk to us, Dr. Gibbs.
Uh, all right. The ICC was created, I think, about 20 years ago. It was an international treaty that created the International Criminal Court in The Hague in the Netherlands. The idea was to establish a kind of global sense of legality associated with the morality that certain types of crimes, crimes against humanity and war crimes and genocide, are global crimes enforceable across borders. This was signed, I believe, by most of the countries of the world, most European countries. It was not signed by the United States, Russia, or Israel.
Mm.
But the idea, I guess, is that it's supposed to be binding on those countries as well, even though we don't recognize it. And the purpose of it was to create individual responsibility. There already was the International Court of Justice, which adjudicated disputes among states, but did not hold individuals accountable for crimes. The ICC would hold individuals accountable for crimes, including, of course, maybe most importantly, prominent individuals like heads of governments and heads of state and heads of militia groups and things like that. And the United States insists that it supports the ICC in general, but it should not be allowed to indict American citizens for war crimes at all. The U.S. believes its own citizens are exempt from this, even if other citizens are not. So there's this inconsistency here. With regard to Netanyahu and Israel, there was recently the indictment, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, and his former defense minister. He was fired as defense minister, Yoav Gallant, not for genocide, but for crimes against humanity and war crimes. And they decided not to do the genocide indictment. The problem that is faced by Israel and the United States is that European countries, America's allies, have all said, consistent with their obligations under the treaty, they would be required to arrest either of these two men if they ever set foot in their countries. Countries like, major countries like France, Britain, the Netherlands, Germany, I believe all of these countries have said, if Netanyahu or Gallant sets foot in their countries for any purpose, tourism, whatever it may be, they will be arrested and turned over to the International Criminal Court for trial. The U.S. has said it will not do this, and so they're free to travel to the United States. The U.S. has condemned this. Several senators basically have even hinted foolishly and ridiculously about possibly taking military action against the International Criminal Court. A preposterous claim. This is in the Netherlands, which is a U.S. ally. But nevertheless, it underscores the fact that the United States itself has some complicity here, because after all, if Israeli leaders are guilty of crimes against humanity and war crimes, they are doing these war crimes with American weapons and American political and economic support. And so if Israel and top Israeli officials are guilty of these crimes, one could, by extension, make an argument the U.S. is guilty as well. Now, the United States has not been indicted in the International Criminal Court. No U.S. officials have been. But it does raise very awkward questions for America, which is that if the top leaders of Israel are sufficiently guilty that they're going to be charged with these crimes and tried, hopefully, at some point, well, what does that say about the United States, which has been backing them to the hilt for decades, and are still backing them to the hilt, and is showing no sign of any change? And it's under Trump, I think we'll see just a continuation of the Biden-Harris policy, which was unconditional support. I think the rhetoric will be even more intense. But apart from rhetoric, I think it'll be the same policy. So we're going to continue to see the U.S. backing what is now being formally charged as a criminal regime, engaging in criminal acts all over the Middle East. Before we were talking about Gaza, but now it's all over Middle East, Lebanon, the West Bank. Haaretz recently had the Israeli newspaper Haaretz had a article that today declared that apartheid is now not only an unofficial policy, but an official policy, because the new Minister of Defense, replacing Gallant, his name is Katz, had stated that preventive detention will only be used in the West Bank against Arabs, but not against Jews. So there's literally formally a two-tier justice system on the West Bank. There always was informally, but now it's formal. That Arabs are subjected to one set of laws and Jews another set of laws. Jewish settlers are subjected to another set of laws. This is to some extent giving a green light to the most extremist elements of the settler movement, most violent elements of them, were organized basically like a little militia, almost army in and of itself. And they've been given extraordinary influence under the new regime. Anyway, I can go on and on about this, but I don't want to keep going.
I think it's important for us to keep going, because what you're doing is you're a counterweight. You and Attorney Fancher are counterweights to the official narrative that we're
Yeah.
seeing in our corporate media, who have lost the faith of the American citizenry.
Yep.
They've lost the faith, and they don't know how serious, and therefore, as a consequence, I don't think Americans know how serious this is. I don't think Americans really understand how our stance on this particular issue, as we welcome Ariel Gold to the stage and from back. She's been vacationing overseas, and so I'm very happy that my sister is back, tanned and healthy and fabulous. Um, I don't think that we really understand how serious this is and what this means and what this says about how we are perceived around the world. And I mean, and what that means to us in hard and soft ways, culturally, what it means for our troops who are overseas, what it means for business. I mean, Dr. Gibbs, I think this is a big deal.
Yes.
Or am I wrong?
It's a big deal, no doubt about it. I think it's one step towards delegitimation internationally of Israel's position. It's astonishing the Israelis aren't more concerned about that. Israeli leaders, you think, would be concerned about that. The only country that's really backing them unconditionally is the United States, and that's about it. And a couple of tiny islands, maybe in the Pacific. Whenever these things come up for votes in the United Nations, condemning Israel and its policies in Gaza and elsewhere, they're overwhelmingly passed, not only by the world, but even our allies in NATO vote in favor of them. Maybe one or two exceptions, Hungary perhaps, but overwhelmingly, and just the United States, Israel, and a couple of tiny microstates in the Pacific, and that's about it. And so this is really a completely illegitimate position the U.S. is taking, and is viewed as illegitimate by virtually the entirety of the world. It's very damaging to America's position. What's amazing is Israeli leaders. Netanyahu is not stupid. I'll say that about him. He's very well educated, very sophisticated. He has no sense of a moral compass, but that's another matter. You'd think in his own interest, in the interest of himself and his country, he would realize that Israel is way overstepping, damaging its credibility to an extent that it's probably beyond repair at this point. And anyway, it's surprising how irrational the Israeli policy is, and even more so, how irrational America's policy is. I might add Donald Trump. He's running the phrase "America first" with regard to everything but Israel seems to be the case. In the case of Israel, it's not America first, apparently. Um, I'm assuming at some point the Republicans will realize what a contradiction that is in their ideology. But for the moment, they seem to be staunchly behind supporting the same policy as Biden and Harris were undertaking in Israel, which is unconditional support for anything Israel does.
Mm. Ariel Gold, what are your thoughts about this? I mean,
Well,
about the ICC
yeah.
essentially taking the Israeli government on. That's this particular administration, they're taking them on.
And it's not just the ICC, it's the countries that have said, and specifically, I want to say the Western countries, because that's where the real punch takes place. It's the Western countries who said they will enforce that warrant, including Canada. And so it really leaves Israel and the United States against the world and quite isolated. And I would say Israel without Netanyahu is so shrewd, but they've got nothing on this. The latest, I mean, of course, they're just going to say it's anti-Semitism. And the last one I heard is, well, why haven't they indicted the U.S.? And I'm like, please bring it on. Indict us for Afghanistan. Like, yes. But, that's not the best argument. So I think this is really exciting. And I'm quite aware that Netanyahu's travel will be quite constrained, unable to go to the UE, to many European countries, unable to go to Canada. He's got the wide United States. But this is serious and really major. And, I've been thinking Putin's in the same situation, but Russia is monstrous. Israel is a teeny tiny sliver of a country. So to have this arrest warrant, it really has an effect in a way that I don't know that we've even imagined yet. And I look forward to seeing how it plays out. Yeah, those are my first thoughts.
Well, and the reason I think you have to put Russia in a different space is because they have a different relationship with the global South.
Yes, that too.
Very different relationship with the global South. And so
they've got plenty of places.
And the global South believe that Russia is picked on because they're in alliance with the global South. So it's not quite the same thing.
No, it's not at all. No,
I'm not saying that you were conflating. I just wanted to illuminate.
No, I was actually meaning that it's quite different.
Yeah. No, you're right. I was just trying to amplify that.
And it prevents him from going to the U.S. where he wasn't going anyway, and some of the NATO countries where he wasn't going anyway. But Russia is huge, and he's got the global South, whereas Netanyahu doesn't have that. This is really constricting, and it's constricting on Israel's image of being able to move about. And it does remind me how small that country is. So if the U.S. changes, if we move the U.S. to say, we will enforce this warrant, Netanyahu's got nowhere to go. Got the couple Arab countries that Israel's normalized relations with, and some other, real maligned small countries in the global South, but really nothing.
Attorney Mark Fancher, what do you make of this? I mean, and this was pushed by, I think, Ariel Gold and Dr. Gibbs. I don't think we can ignore the fact that South Africa and African countries are taking another position. They're really stepping to the fore on the global stage because they pushed this. And then other nations in the global South stood in lockstep with each other, and they have made this happen. But let's step back. We can get to that. What do you make of this arrest warrant? What does this mean?
Well, it's very gratifying to me personally, and to understand. Let me give you a little context. I graduated from law school in 1983, and during that period, I was, for a lot of reasons, concerned about many international conflicts and struggles. Most notably the anti-apartheid movement and other things that were happening at that point. And one of the big disappointments to me when I was in law school is that international law seemed to be almost academic. That there was no real enforcement mechanism. The benefit of it was that if you had a nation or a state to violate the terms or provisions of an international treaty or a convention, that at best what that meant is that you had made a record, that you had established a case for anything that the international community might choose to do against that country. Whether that included embargoes or on the other extreme, military intervention. It established as a matter of record that this is a lawful action that we're taking against a country which has violated the provisions of international treaties. And in practical terms, that didn't always mean very much, particularly when there were bad individual actors, heads of state, generals, people who were commanding military forces who, notwithstanding what may have been done to the countries that they served or represented, they as individuals were never punished. They engaged in these criminal acts with impunity. And that was always very disturbing to me, particularly when I watched what was happening in South Africa under the apartheid regime, when I watched Ronald Reagan invade Grenada, when I saw him use proxy forces to commit all kinds of atrocities in Nicaragua. And it just went on. And I just always used to dream of the possibility that there would be some legal mechanism, some way of prosecuting the individuals who were making these decisions, because I thought that if you could prosecute them, then that might serve as a deterrent to the decisions that other individuals might make. So when the Rome Statute, which is what created the International Criminal Court, now that's separate from the International Court of Justice, where South Africa filed a complaint. When that was, created in 1998, it did not go into effect immediately. They did not begin prosecuting cases right away, but the concept of it was very exciting to me, and it just fired my imagination because I thought, at long last, here is a court that has been set up specifically for the purpose of holding individuals responsible for their bad acts. And, and so some years later, when they actually appointed a prosecutor and they began to actually look at cases and process them, on behalf of the National Conference of Black Lawyers, I and others who were part of a team put together a petition to hold U.S. government officials responsible for the crimes that were committed during Hurricane Katrina. And so we submitted that with hopes that at least it might elevate the issue. It might bring to the surface some contradictions and information about the crimes that were committed during that. So when that petition was denied, it was not terribly disturbing to me because usually those cases don't come from private parties. Private parties have to request the prosecutor, just have to bring it to his attention and hope that he will initiate an action. But so I wasn't totally disappointed. But then in the years that followed, what began to emerge was a pattern where the International Criminal Court was targeting only African leaders for crimes that were happening in their countries. And while these atrocities and human rights violations, genocide, and other things were happening in other countries, it was only African countries that were targeted for prosecution. And so that created a whole other controversy, and it was extremely disappointing to me because I thought, well, I had such high hopes for this court, and now we see that it is just falling in line and serving the interests of those who have dominated the international scene for so long. And they even did a study, and one of the researchers concluded that what may have been the cause of this African-focused prosecution was the fact that the International Criminal Court's funding came primarily from Western nations. And so they were not going to bite the hands that feed them. So I pretty much wrote this off and thought it was a lost cause. So for now, when we see that they're going after, when they've issued an arrest warrant for Netanyahu and others, this has revived my hopes. And even if they don't follow through with the full prosecution, because an arrest warrant doesn't mean that the court has reached the conclusion that Netanyahu or others have actually committed genocide. It just means that the prosecutor has a reasonable basis for believing that an arrest is necessary, and that because there is a reasonable belief that there is a crime in progress, genocide is in progress, and that they need to arrest this person to minimize whatever damage may be ongoing until such time as he is brought into the court to face charges and to go through a trial. But even if they don't ever bring him to trial, I think Ariel made reference to it. I mean, the impact of this in terms of what it says to the world is of great value, because ultimately we default to the way in which international law was enforced even before the creation of the International Criminal Court. And that is essentially by way of marginalizing or ostracizing a criminal country, in this case, a criminal individual, and basically making them a pariah, and in effect, taking away the support that they need to continue to engage in the crimes that they commit. And so that was essentially what happened in the case of apartheid in South Africa, because the world came together and through boycotts and through information and public education divestment and arrests outside of the South African embassy and all of the things that went into the Free South Africa movement and other things, they were able to make the apartheid regime a pariah and to make that regime unsustainable and finally to have it collapse. That is what's necessary to bring down apartheid in Israel. And so I think, David Gibbs described, what effectively is an apartheid state there. And if it's good enough for South Africa, it's certainly good enough for Israel. And it explains, at least in my mind, why South Africa, which has been liberated from political apartheid, saw it fit to immediately go to the International Court of Justice and to pursue charges of genocide against Israel. They recognized that it smelled just like what they had been through, and so it's no surprise that that's what they did. And the last point is that I'm thrilled about it because I think it also helps to create a vision for people who are looking for alternatives to this system that we have domestically. I've said a number of times that I really think that our salvation, our liberation, will come not from trying to win influence or positions within the U.S. government, but it will come from our having joined with forces around the world, communities, nations that share the interests of the oppressed and who are prepared on an international level to zero in on the culprits and to attack them globally as opposed to just through the structures that have been created to preserve the power of those who are most culpable. And this helps to make this concrete, the ways in which that can be done. In the same way that Israel will hopefully become a pariah regime, then it's possible to make the United States regime a pariah as well, all to the benefit of the people who actually live here and who love this country and who, because of their love for this country, don't want to have it continue to be controlled by an oligarchy that means all of us great harm.
Dr. David Gibbs. Yes.
I'm gonna have to go now. I need to.
Of course, but I wanted a closing comment from you because.
Oh, okay. All right. Sure.
I mean, just symbolically, what does this mean? Just what is our takeaway from this, in your estimation?
Well, I just following up on what Mark Fancher just said, to the extent that Israel is being made a pariah, but it also, to some extent, is by implication making the United States a bit of a pariah as well. Because if Israel is the guilty party here, then surely the United States, which is making this all possible, is guilty to a significant degree as well for what Israel is doing. The fact that we know what Israel is doing, they've been doing it for years, decades really, and the United States has been backing them anyway, in spite of this fact, means the United States is also culpable. I think that what we need to do in the United States is catch up with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world has distanced itself and condemned what Israel is doing in the Middle East. And the United States needs to catch up with that fact. And there's been a tremendous amount of pro-Israel propaganda over decades that has been saturated on the public. And there is still significant public support for Israel from a variety of different groups in the United States. It's far beyond just the Jewish community, which is only 2% anyway, and is divided on their opinion. But a large percentage of the United States still views Israel as the heroic underdog in this fight. And so I think those of us who will have more information about this issue really have a bit of a duty to try and counteract this propaganda so the United States can join the rest of the world and say the kind of conduct of what Israel is doing, first in Gaza, now in Lebanon, in the West Bank, all over the Middle East, is simply unacceptable.
All right. Dr. David Gibbs, the author of The Revolt of the Rich. Put that under your Christmas tree. Go to Amazon and get it right now. It'll help to explain why we've had this billionaire takeover of our politics on the right and the left. there's there's one party. It's the power party. Everybody. They just have different sales pitches. That's how I'm going to put it now. But
Hi, everybody. Nice to be on with you.
blessings to you. And well, Ariel, I mean, let's talk about. Help me to understand the internal conversation that you're having in the Jewish community, because indeed, much of this, the struggle, really calling out Israel and the ceasefire and anti-apartheid struggle, it is led by young and really by progressive Jewish people in the United States and progressive Jewish people all over the world, which is something that we're not hearing as we're watching. I'm not just going to say the Trump administration, because the Biden administration was trying to do it too, shut down on free speech. Now, I mean, it is becoming incredibly difficult. I mean, they're even trying to rewrite the Bible. I've never seen anything so dangerous, I would say, in my lifetime. It's because it's very dangerous when you start dipping into people and their belief systems. That's a third rail, and more, because that goes to the core of who you are. What is the internal discussion, if you will, that you're having? I think it's important for us to know that, because I don't know what it is.
And I want to speak kind of personally regarding my own family and networks. It's painful. It's painful. Mm-hmm. This is a deep reckoning, and it's dividing some families, and it's creating pain. And you know what we say, like, change is painful, right? And what is it like? It's painful in the hallway, right? Until we get to the other side of this. And you don't give up privilege without pain, right? It's taking place, it's happening, and it is the young generation that is leading it. And the conversations are taking place. They'll be taking place at Thanksgiving tables on Thursday between intergenerational, which needs to happen, right? Because it's one thing for the young people to lead, but it's another thing to lose family, right? If we don't have our family in this world, we don't have anything. So even where we disagree, and so for me, it's best where we can talk,
mm-hmm.
right? And where we can talk about the subject. And I sometimes think of it as how to find where the commonalities we have rather than the disagreements. To, like I say to sometimes when we're on speaking terms, which we haven't been for a number of months, this very far right cousin that I have in Israel loves Trump and Bibi and this and that. But when we are talking, which is when he can be respectful to me and not say demeaning things, I say to him often, like, hey, we have much more in common than we disagree on. We both love Shabbat. We both love our children, and we both want our people to be safe. So, to come from that place. And we talk about open space a lot these days, like, can a synagogue handle these difficult disagreements and a big tent, which includes some real pro-Israel people, and, recognizing like where some folks came from. If you look at like what Zionism has meant to older generations of Jews, it has had this, meaning of safety in the wake of losing so many family members to the Holocaust and so many years of persecution. Now, it's not keeping Jews safe, quite the opposite. But we have to hear each other's pain, and we have to hear each other's narrative and story and each other's fear. What does a family member of mine from an older generation hear when they hear the word intifada? Or they hear one state solution. And so how do we recognize that there are different meanings, and how do we acknowledge that fear and that anxiety and be able to have those conversations so that we can get past? And, that's reconciliation, right? The United States had to do it during civil rights and during the end of slavery. And, you look outside now and nobody didn't like Dr. King now, right? Like, everybody, even the Confederates, loved Dr. King. So we will get to that place in time, but how can we get there with love? How can we fight the system and not the people? And, you know, it's a process, and that's an internal process that's taking place in the Jewish American community, which I am so proud to say. As the Democratic Party has moved, to support Palestinian rights, when this last election happened, the Jewish vote did not shift. We voted Democratic. And when I speak about the Jewish vote and I speak about this, I'm speaking about the non-Orthodox community. The Orthodox community,
the difference being
a different direction.
Okay.
The Orthodox community is moving to the right, is very much voting for Trump, and they're dealing with different issues. One thing they're dealing with is a lack of education. If you look at the most heavily populated Jewish, which are Orthodox areas of America, Brooklyn, the Hudson Valley, Rockland County, where my office is located, they're not receiving a secular education, those children. They're not learning English. They're not learning English, math, history outside. They're just learning religion. And so they don't have a political awareness that way. It's very cult-like, and it is the Rebbe, the leader of the community, who tells them how to vote. So that's a whole different thing, and that's a different struggle inside the Jewish community of like, how do we preserve that history and that faith and yet force change because it's unacceptable. But so that aside, the non-Orthodox community, we still voted Democratic. We maintained our numbers. It's close to 80%. So, and that's because we vote on domestic issues. We identify as Americans first and Jewish second. And so we vote on American issues, and we believe very much in progressive values. So that's a real opening there. And there's a big, it's been happening for many years now, but we call it the Great Divorce between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry. With Israeli society being in deep trouble. And many of our family members who are Israeli, turning hard right and having very different values than American Jewry has, the opposite of progressive. And that's across a range of issues, from LGBTQ rights to interfaith marriage to women's rights to, so many things. And we have to lead that. And we have to do that with love again as well, because these are still our people. And I care very deeply about what happens to Israelis, to Israeli Jews. I care very, very deeply. And it very much pains me to know what trouble their society is in.
But do they understand that? Because I don't think that, I think it's a false choice. That my father always said that, Palestinian justice is married to Israeli security.
Yes.
Even as he has taken hits, real and manufactured. And they've been manufactured really because this community really came after him 10 toes down to destroy his campaigns that are historic. And as we're pulling together historical pieces and documentaries, it's interesting. The filmmakers don't want to touch that part. I said, that's why we had the Fruit of Islam protecting him. Are you kidding me? And when my parents stepped into this space in the Middle East, my mother and father said, we didn't know what we were walking into. We just saw something that was unjust and we were trying to deal with it. Ariel and Mark, that was it. And this was, we're on assignment from Dr. King. So this is part of that. And one of the things that is unsettling is I don't know. I mean, and the thing is, Netanyahu's an interesting figure because he was raised in Philly. I mean, he is as American as he is Israeli. He was raised in the United States. Spent a lot of time here. He knows America. But I think he's making a real mistake. Like Bernadette says, underdog. How? I mean, because now the narrative has been completely turned around, Ariel. And I don't, and it's like, I don't even think that they understand that even when Donald Trump said we've got to end this thing, the other side of what he said, that's why I read everything and I try to read the whole thing so I can get the context. He said, do you know what this is looking like for you? I didn't say he was coming from this perspective of a peacenik. He said, you're losing the PR war. You got to stop this, because he's a pragmatist. People don't, I'm not taking up for anybody. I just try to assess people where they are. This is not about me and my feelings. He's a pragmatist. So he has a lot of Arab friends. He tries to do business. That's what businessmen do. He's like, this is it. And I'm just saying, going after the Bible, which is what they're doing legislatively, going after these young people on the college campuses, going after us in social media. I mean, it's just, goodness gracious, do you not know what's happening here? This is dangerous. And when we were all together the last time before you went away, I'm so glad you're back home, my dear sister. I'm glad you're home so I can get you back tomorrow morning, but in time for Thanksgiving. And let me shift this to you, Mark, because one of the what makes me unsettled in this moment is something that honestly I've not seen, this anti-Semitism. See, as Black people, we're dealing with the black-white thing all the time, because you're the readily identifiable other, Ariel. My mother said every time my sons leave or my husband leaves the house, I don't know if they're going to get back. And that's the reality for Black people here. People look Black. So all the other fights, you're like, you kind of miss them, not, you do, because you're sitting up here trying to survive, because a traffic stop could be deadly for Black folks in the United States. But Attorney Fancher, Mark, the narrative has changed. I don't think they get it.
Yeah, Ariel has described a beautiful community of people globally. And there is no reason why there should be anti-Semitism in this world, because of the richness of their culture, their history, their faith. And I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and my parents sent me to a school that was operated by a teachers college there. And one of my professors told me that when he was just moving to town and looking for work, that he was at a cocktail party, and somebody approached him and said, "So where are you thinking about going?" And so he says, "Well, I'm thinking about going to, whatever the school was." And he says, "And I'm also thinking about going to," and then he named the school that I went to. And so he says, "Oh, well, you should go to the other school." He says, "Why?" He says, "Because that school, that other school, the one that I went to," he says, "it's just a bunch of Jews and N-words there." And so, he said that made up, that sealed the deal. He said he's going to come teach where I went to school. And it was within the Bible Belt, and it was within the Jewish community that Black people found open arms and support. And so, it's a beautiful community.
I think of Einstein teaching at Black colleges.
Yeah.
It's like, at the height of segregation, he said, "No, I'm going over here."
Yeah. And the role that they played in the civil rights movement, shedding their blood, Schwerner and Goodman. So we could go on and on about that. And that's part of what fuels my rage, is that I think that individuals like Netanyahu, and all people who have a very cynical and sinister approach and use of Zionism as a weapon, do a great disservice to a broad community of people who are of goodwill, of good faith, and filled with love. And it's part of why I'm so excited about the fact that the International Criminal Court is prepared now to go into these spaces, because they can begin to isolate bad actors and separate them out, from the broad mass of community that they supposedly represent. They go and they commit incredible crimes against people. They're the ones, these individuals are the ones that commit the crimes. And then when somebody calls them to account, they say, "You're being anti-Semitic," which plants an idea in the heads of many people outside of that community. by saying that you're being anti-Semitic because I chose to murder in cold blood thousands of people. By saying that, it implies that all Jewish people support that they're on board with that program. It unfairly paints them with that brush. And so I think that we just really need to move to a point where we're identifying individual criminals and holding the individual criminals accountable, as opposed to just painting with a broad brush and saying that because the criminals are part of a community of faith, that everybody that subscribes to that faith is somehow also culpable. And I'll go on to say this, that we can't also minimize the impact of the United States in the way in which the International Criminal Court has functioned. The fact is that when the Rome Statute was first drafted, and they were looking for countries to sign onto it, Bill Clinton signed it on behalf of the United States, but he added some qualifications to it because of some reservations that he had. When George W. Bush came into office, George W. Bush erased Bill Clinton's signature from the Rome Statute so that it would no longer be subject to the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction. And it's not just that they separated themselves out and removed the United States from the jurisdiction of the court, but in places where the United States was involved or engaged in acts that conceivably could fall within the jurisdiction of the court and give the court jurisdiction over U.S. actors, they went into these countries, particularly in Africa, and blackmailed the heads of state into signing agreements that they would not collaborate with the International Criminal Court if there were efforts to prosecute U.S. officials and U.S. soldiers for things that they were doing in their countries. So this is not something that the United States is just sort of innocently standing aside and looking at things unfold and saying, and shrugging their shoulders and saying, I don't know why they're going after this nice Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know why. I mean, they're very much involved, up to their eyeballs, and it's a knowing participation. It's a criminal participation, and I think that, as Dr. Gibbs said, that the U.S. really needs to be the next target for the court.
Well, because and you're agreeing with him, Ariel. Why? Because one of my concerns as an American is the world has shifted. More and more countries are aligning with the BRICS nations. America increasingly people are pulling away. They're pulling off of the American currency as the reserve currency of the world. That's going to radically change our standard of living. I mean, there's a lot going on. You can't just go. America can't just unilaterally do anything anymore. It doesn't work that way. This is not just after the Second World War. We're on the verge of a third one over this and other things. And I think that this is something that needs to be explained to the American public so they can understand not only what this means domestically, but what this means internationally. Ariel. So what was it that Mark said that made sense to you?
That America needs to be taken to the ICC. And, we need to have moral consistency, right? So, yes, Netanyahu deserves an arrest warrant. And let's be clear, and one of the ways that old anti-Semitism can kind of sneak into our movement on the left sometimes is making Israel saying it's the worst country ever in the history of the world, or it commits the most crimes in the world, because I'm sorry, but the U.S. takes that prize. So
that part,
if we're gonna send Netanyahu to the ICC, we got a lot of folks in the U.S. to send to the ICC.
Well, that's how the world talks about Kissinger. But the world talks that way, and no one really knows that. I'm like, you guys, And George W. Bush, there's so many places in the world Kissinger could not go that George W. Bush cannot go today because
Yep.
of this.
Yep. And there's some places Obama might not be, maybe not should be able to go.
That's it.
There's
Yeah.
some let's have accountability. Let's have moral consistency. Let's enforce international law and let's embrace it. And one of those tasks involves the U.S. Acknowledging international law, not rules-based order, or however we like to frame it, making up our own just so that we can exempt ourselves and our good friend Israel. But let's be consistent here. Let's build a better world we want to live in, and that means both accountability and it means reconciliation.
Is that pie in the sky?
So many yes and no. We can move in a direction. We're not going to get there tomorrow, but as we say, like, pessimism is a privilege. So we have to have those goals and that optimism. Do I think we're just going to get there tomorrow? No, but I think we could move a lot closer. I think we could start to acknowledge and represent and start to promote international law as it is on the books, rather than trying to sanction countries that adhere to it and say that they will follow the ICC. We need to become one of those. And I think that is achievable in the relatively near future. I don't think that's pie in the sky at all. And I think that's a huge step forward.
Well, I just wanted to ask that question, before you continue, Mark, because I think that people need to understand that peace is possible. This is achievable because we've got to change our paradigm, Ariel. That's what the Fellowship of Reconciliation, and you are the first Jewish person to head this ecumenical body that Dr. King was so proud to be a part of, because we don't see lines. Those of us of faith don't see lines between religions. I mean, I don't. And thank God I don't. I'm a Baptist. What do they say in the church? In the Baptist church, I'm a Baptist. I'm glad God isn't. Really. And so, Mark, your response was, because we're going to be closing this out in a few minutes, but I'm so glad that we've had this discussion as we move into this holy season for so many of us. And we really do need to make this a holy season as we're coming together on Thursday, because I see people fighting with each other. People are talking about that. It's not funny. It's not funny. We had a friend who was killed by his stepfather on Thanksgiving Day. I've lived through that, because his stepfather had an axe to grind. It was a horrible thing. And because we are not bridling our tongues, and because we're so intolerant of each other, it's not funny. And what's happening, those of us who are watching this slaughter over in the Middle East, and ignoring what's happening in Haiti and ignoring what's happening in the Congo. I mean, this has to stop, Mark.
Yeah, and I think it has to stop, because the overwhelming number of people, even the people that wear red baseball caps, if you really talk to them, they on some level really want the human family to come together.
Mm-hmm.
But what creates obstacles to this, and what makes it seem so pie in the sky, is the existence of systems which by design ensure the continuing division, tension, warfare, and exploitation of humans by humans. So if you have a capitalist system that says by design what we want is to make greed a virtue, we want people to hoard wealth, we want class division, and we want to put we want permanent poverty. We always want it to be there. We want cutthroat competition. When you have a system that says that that's the way things should be, then that's what you're going to get. When you have a system like imperialism, which says that what we're going to do is we're going to reach across national borders and into the countries of others, we're going to pillage and rape and rob other people's resources, we're going to exploit and oppress them for the benefit of the mother country, then you're going to have bad and disastrous results. When you have Zionism as a doctrine which says that we by right have a right to go into a territory and to create an apartheid state, and if anybody stands up against us, then we're going to wipe them out, then that's what you're going to have. So I think that the campaign, which I regard as a revolution, against these systems is an essential precondition to building the type of community of human beings that I think that we all want to see come into existence. We eradicate those things, eradicate those systems, which by their very design are intended to ensure exploitation, oppression, hatred, division. We get rid of those things, then I think we got a shot at it, and it's not so pie in the sky.
It's not pie in the sky. It's very real. Ariel, you want to say anything before we go? And I'm so glad that you're back home, my dear sister. I missed you. Okay.
I missed being on with you.
Not
I
that
did.
I love you, Mark, but I've missed my girl.
I miss being on with you, Santita.
So I guess you're coming home. Okay.
I guess I'm going to close out by saying there will be difficult conversations taking place at Thanksgiving tables across America, and not just Jewish Thanksgiving tables, but many, Jewish being one that is close to my heart. And I want to appeal to people to be kind, to that we can talk about our values and our positions and all of that, and we can recognize the humanity in each other at the same time. And what's that? You catch more flies with honey, right? We're going to get further if we can connect with each other than we are if we're going to scream at each other across the table. So let's practice how we find our commonalities as we speak about our values and what needs to take place as we go into 2025 and a Trump presidency and Project 2025 and all of that. There is a lot that we're going into. So let's pace ourselves and let's model the world we want to create by having that be loving conversations, whether that's about bodily autonomy or LGBTQ rights or Gaza and Lebanon. Let's do so with love. Let's keep those 6 principles of nonviolence that Dr. King taught us in the forefront as we have those transformational. They are transformational. We are looking to change hearts and minds, not beat each other up. So let's fight systems, not people, and have transformative conversations this Thanksgiving.
We can do that. Attorney Mark Fancher?
Hey, I second everything that Ariel said. When we give thanks, remember who we're thanking. Without God, none of our possibilities exist, and we have great possibilities.
That's right. Without God, we are nothing, and we have nothing. We have each other. And those of you who are agnostic or atheists, I respect that. I appreciate that. You are my sisters and brothers. Also, we are one family, whatever our belief systems. But we have to move toward justice, everybody. We have to move toward justice. We have to move in love. That's a fact. Those are the facts. And anyone who's in trouble anywhere means that we're imperiled everywhere. So let's work this out. And we can do that. We can do that. You can love all of these people and want justice at the same time. We don't have to make any false choices here. We don't. We don't. So I love you, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. Go on and get in that grocery line. Go get that turkey. And whatever else you're going to be eating this week. I'll see you in the morning. But, that having been said, I'm sending you all my love on behalf of Attorney Mark Fancher and Ariel Gold, who's back in the country. Yay. And Dr. David Gibbs, sending you all so much love. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. God bless you. Much love to you, Newport 348, Andre, Kenneth, Robert, Shalom, everybody. Bernadette, Lorraine, Carol, my sister from another Mr. Jewel. I love all of you. I love you. Eric out there in California, Miss Zenobia. Love you, love you. MC, Vixen V. Oh my God, so many of you. And those of you who I don't even see in the chat line, sending you so much love. See you in the morning on the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota.